Welcome, film enthusiasts. Before we start today's video, we wanted to thank you for your interaction and support on our videos. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay updated with all the latest content. Let's dive into our movie. The poor boy who is considered a nerd discovers he has extraordinary powers. He can mimic anyone around him, taking on their appearance and abilities. He's fed up with the struggles he faces at school from everyone. When he saw Jason bullying one of his classmates, Ben decided to teach him a lesson and knocked him to the ground. After Jason fell, he called his friends to catch Ben, but Ben managed to escape and hid in the men's restroom. Jason then decided to open all the stalls one by one to find him, but instead of finding Ben, he found Leonard, one of their classmates, and went crazy because Ben had disappeared suddenly. Going back a month in time, Ben had just transferred to Eric's school after moving to the city with his mom. The first person to approach him was Kenny, because Ben was shy, introverted, and struggled to make friends. This made him an easy target for bullies like Jason. In recent years, his mom had started a relationship with Max's dad. After they got married, the four of them became one family. One morning, Ben went downstairs to drink his coffee and discovered that his mom didn't recognize him. He tried to understand what was happening. When he looked in the mirror, he saw that he had taken on Kenny's appearance. He was stunned. At that moment, he ran out of the house and kept running through the streets until he reached school. When he met Max, he tried to explain what was happening, but she didn't believe him until she saw Kenny walking towards the school. Suddenly, the school bell rang, and Max told her brother to hide until the class ended so no one would notice that there were two Kennys at school. Meanwhile, his mom, worried about her son's disappearance, decided to go to the school to talk to Max. But Max claimed she didn't know where he was. At that moment, Phil decided to call the police for help in searching for the boy. Ben went into a state of panic when he realized he couldn't return home. With nowhere to go, he decided to wander in the park to think about what to do. In the park, he met Carter, who, strangely, knew who he was. She helped him understand his superpower, explaining that this situation might recur. But once he learns to control his powers, everything will be fine. After saying this, Carter disappeared, and Ben fell asleep in the park out of exhaustion. Hours later, he woke up during a storm and found his body had returned to normal. He then ran through the streets, only to be caught by Detective Darren, who took him back home. With Max's help, Ben came up with a convincing excuse to explain why he had been missing. He went inside and had dinner. When Darren returned home, he looked at a framed picture of his daughter. His eyes filled with tears because he couldn't go a day without missing Carter. In the following weeks, Ben sought Max's help to try transforming again. But no matter what he did, his powers wouldn't activate. After many failed attempts, he decided to give up and began learning how to deal with his frustration and live as a normal boy again. One day, before the kids arrived at school, Darren showed up and asked to speak with Ben privately. The detective asked him if he had seen a certain symbol before, but Ben said no. That same evening at dinner, Phil and Liz asked him about his conversation with Darren, but Ben said it was nothing important. Later, he discovered that Carter, whom he had seen in the park, was the detective's daughter, whom he had raised alone after his wife passed away. Ben asked Max about Carter and learned that no one had seen her since she was sent to boarding school. At that moment, Ben told her he had seen Carter in the park a few days ago. Max was shocked by the news. As they were heading home after finishing their conversation, they saw Jason picking new victims. When they saw Owen being bullied, Ben got upset and decided to intervene. But his plan was interrupted when Max noticed that her brother's appearance had changed and he now looked exactly like Owen. Suddenly, Max received a message from her mom asking her to meet her. Ben decided to run to the park again, hoping to meet Carter there. When he arrived, he was surprised to find Darren, who revealed that he hadn't seen his daughter for a long time. Darren explained that 2 years ago, during a big storm in the city, he had been trying to rescue people when he saw Carter running towards the tornado. After that, the storm disappeared, and Carter had to leave to keep herself safe. Darren had to let her go for her protection, and he hadn't seen her since. After hearing this story, Ben noticed his body returning to normal and decided to rush back home. That night, when Liz took Max to the store to shop for the school party, Ben stayed home preparing dinner with Phil. Suddenly, while talking, he discovered that his voice had changed to sound exactly like Jason's. Luckily, Liz and Max returned home just in time, and Ben ran to his room. After calming down, he managed to return his voice to normal. Phil asked him to take dinner to Max, but instead of buying a dress, Max had returned home upset, feeling that Liz was trying to take her mother's place. The next morning, when Ben arrived at school, he went to his locker where Jason always left rotten food. This time, Jason was shocked to find the rotten food in his own locker. He suspected Ben was behind it and decided to attack him, but Max intervened to defend her brother, throwing the rotten food on Jason's clothes. At that moment, one of the teachers saw her and the principal scolded her, saying he would call her father. The next morning, Carter appeared to Ben and scolded him for wasting his powers on trivial things because of him. When he saw her, he asked why she was hiding. She told him that the storm that almost destroyed the city was caused by one of the shapeshifters. The truth was, the storm was her doing. Carter explained that Yates Kirk was trying to capture her to steal her powers. Before Ben could ask more questions, Carter told him he needed to prove he could be trusted. Until then, she would continue to use her ability to remain hidden and keep an eye on him. That weekend, Max went to her mom's house, so Phil decided to take Liz and Ben out for lunch at a mall restaurant. There, they ran into Jason and his mom, who invited them to sit together since their kids were classmates. Phil and Liz didn't know that Jason was the bully who tormented their son at school. Ben was furious that Jason could act like a good kid in front of adults. The next day, Max and Ben saw Jason targeting Owen again, trying to knock over his lunch. They tried to record the scene but failed because he started running afterward. When Ben saw the boy running towards the clothing section, he hurried to catch up and tried to calm him down. But at that moment, the boy noticed that he was beginning to change and quickly left the place. A few minutes later, Max appeared, and the girl was surprised to discover that her brother had become like the person he hated most. At that moment, Ben had an idea to pretend to be Jason and asked Max to help him film some scenes to show their mother the boy's true nature. But Max didn't agree with the idea, saying that bullying other kids wasn't a good way to use his powers. Later that afternoon, while walking through school, Ben was surprised by Owen's arrival, who decided to take revenge for the attacks he had endured. After being beaten, Ben fainted and woke up only in the hospital, where his mother was treating him. She expressed her suspicion that Jason might be the boy who broke her son's camera. Suddenly, Ben noticed his arm returning to its normal state and quickly ran away before his mother could see what was happening to him. When he returned home, he showed Max a video circulating online about a storm that occurred 2 years ago. Upon enlarging the image, they discovered someone else inside the tornado. Ben started asking about the other woman inside the tornado. The next morning, Ben and Max decided to investigate the matter and went to the location shown in the video. However, their investigation was interrupted when Max received a message from her mother and decided to meet her at the library. That day was Max's 13th birthday, and Julia was excited to celebrate at her favorite restaurant. She made it clear that Ben and his mother weren't invited, but later that evening, when Max left the house to meet her mother, Ben waited for his mom to return from work and invited her to the same restaurant Julia had booked, without knowing it was the same place where Max's birthday celebration was happening. Lisa took her son to the restaurant, and shortly after the birthday girl arrived. At that moment, Ben's plan succeeded, and the 5 of them ended up having dinner together. While the adults were talking, Ben and Max excused themselves, pretending to go to the bathroom. In reality, they were heading to the apartment where the woman from the photo had been 2 years ago. When they entered the building, Ben saw a boy leaving with his family, seemingly preparing to vacate the apartment. Ben entered the apartment to investigate and noticed the woman looking out the window. Meanwhile, Max looked around the place and discovered it was newly rented and filled with boxes. Suddenly, Enzo's family appeared, forcing them to hide. To escape the situation, Ben transformed into Enzo to distract his family, allowing Max to leave the apartment. Once she got out, Ben followed her, and they returned to the table for the birthday celebration. That night, when Max returned home, she found a birthday card from Carter under her pillow, along with a newspaper article featuring the woman who had been at the window. As for Ben, after receiving a photography kit as a gift from his stepfather, he decided to create a photo board to compile all the evidence he and his sister had gathered so far. That afternoon, while taking a break, they noticed Vivian Kennedy's picture in the newspaper. According to the article, she was Darren's late wife and Carter's mother. After discovering this, they decided to speak with the detective. Ben transformed into Leonard to avoid suspicion. With Max's help, Ben convinced Darren to agree to an interview under the pretense of a school project. While Ben asked him some questions, Max sneaked into Carter's room to search for clues. She found an old notebook belonging to the girl and took some photos as evidence. At that moment, Ben's cover was blown when Darren discovered the boy was a shapeshifter. Darren demanded that Ben transform into Carter, wanting to see her one more time. Minutes later, as they were biking home, they noticed someone on a motorcycle following them. Max began to suspect the man, but they decided to continue to Morgan's house. They convinced her to let them in after she realized Ben had superpowers. Morgan revealed she could fly and disclosed the real reason behind the storm that had occurred that night. Shortly after, Yates arrived in town, seeking revenge. He had been Vivian Kennedy's student but was arrogant and refused to learn, leading to his expulsion, which deeply angered him. What no one expected was for Yates to go after Carter for revenge. Morgan and a group of students gathered to defeat Yates, but he was stronger than ever and threw all his opponents into the tornado. Morgan unleashed a powerful energy burst, stopping the storm and restoring the powers. The next day, after class, Ben and Max returned to their photography studio. Suddenly, Phil appeared. When he saw Vivian's picture on the wall, the man panicked and left in fear. The next morning at school, Ben saw his sister Max being humiliated by one of the popular girls. He advised her to stand up for herself next time, but Max insisted on staying out of trouble. So Ben decided to act on her behalf, transforming into his sister and confronting Danielle, seeking revenge. At that moment, Julia arrived at school to pick up her daughter and take her shopping for a new dress for the school dance. With no way out, Ben decided to accompany them to the store. On the way, he contacted Max to explain what had happened. Shortly after, Max arrived at the store and entered the fitting room where Ben was hiding. Upset, Max told him she didn't need his help to defend herself and that he shouldn't use his powers to manipulate people. After a heated argument, Ben left and returned home, realizing how upset Max was with his actions. He understood he had made a big mistake and began thinking of ways to make amends. That afternoon, Ben went back to the park to look for Carter and discovered she was in trouble. Yates had impersonated Morgan to get close to Wyatt, causing Wyatt to lose his powers. Carter asked Ben to meet her at the mall the next day. During that time, Ben tried to reconcile with his sister, but Max wasn't ready to forgive him. The next morning, Carter met Ben at the mall to train him on his powers. They encountered a very strange young man. When Carter noticed his hand, she realized he was wearing a bracelet belonging to her friends and quickly fled. Ben followed her, but was attacked by Alistair Morris. Carter appeared and managed to make him disappear, helping Ben escape. After ensuring he was safe, Carter left. Meanwhile, Darren investigated the mall's surveillance cameras. He discovered that Ben was involved in the incident and decided to go talk to him. The investigator told him that Ben was in danger and wanted to help him, but Ben refused and said there was nothing he could do to protect him. In the afternoon, Ben met Carter in the park and went with her to the storage, where Morgan was hiding. Morgan told them that after she left her house, Yates appeared and stole her powers. Yates was a former classmate of Rhonda White in school. He was known for always breaking the rules. When he found out he wouldn't graduate because of his behavior, he decided to act and got rid of Vivian. After that, he went looking for Carter to steal her powers, because Vivian had given her powers greater than all the other mutants. The group thought Yates had lost his powers during the stormy night, but they were wrong, and now the man had become stronger than ever. He was planning to steal the powers of all the other mutants. After discovering the truth, Ben decided to leave because he knew he wasn't strong enough to stop Yates. During her last days in the hospital after the attack, Vivian spent her time with her daughter. While she was sleeping, Carter received a strange gift. After investigating the person responsible for the mall attack, they discovered he had been imprisoned in the city for a while. At another time, the courts decided to meet the young man to interrogate him and show him a photo that had been taken at the mall a few days ago. When he saw the photo recorded by the security camera, Alistair was confused, but Darren told him that someone was trying to impersonate him. He asked for his help to find Yates, but when he heard the name, Alistair revealed that he and Yates were close friends. He said he had sacrificed himself to save him and gave up his powers for him, believing Yates would repay the favor one day. After going to prison, Darren decided to meet Morgan and give her the file because Yates was using his identity to hide. The next morning, on his way to school, Ben was surprised to see Carter again. At that time, the girl told him that apart from Yates's primary power, he was the only mutant who could change his appearance. This made her believe that Ben's powers might be useful in defeating her enemy, as he could pretend to be Carter to trap him. When Ben heard this, he realized the girl intended to use him as bait, which upset him. Because of this, Morgan decided to seek Maxie's help and convince her to persuade her brother to assist her. If he didn't cooperate, it would endanger Carter and her friends. At another time, Maxie decided to talk to her brother and managed to convince him to listen to Morgan's plan. When they reached the storage, Morgan revealed that thanks to the file provided by investigator Darren, she now knew Yates's location. The plan was to enter Yates's house and use Ben's powers to distract him, while the real Carter would capture the villain and stop his powers. Because, apart from her ability to hide, Carter had another power she inherited from her mother. If the plan succeeded, Morgan and the other mutants could regain their powers, and Yates would no longer be able to threaten them. The next morning, the group entered Morris's house and started looking for Yates, but they discovered he wasn't there. They took the opportunity to explain everything to his family, who said they couldn't understand how their son had turned so evil. After the first attempt failed, Ben decided to continue his life normally and went to school. During lunch, he talked with his friends about the spring party that would be held at the weekend. He learned that his mom and Phil had volunteered to work as supervisors at the party. On Saturday night, the man and his wife hosted some guests at their house for a small party. While the guests were enjoying themselves, Ben decided to go to the photo studio to send a message to Maxie, as he suspected that Yates had entered the party. At that moment, Phil appeared and began confronting him. Quickly, Ben discovered he was facing his enemy in disguise. He tried to attack him, but Yates managed to knock him out. After that, Yates stole Ben's appearance and went looking for the other kids at school. When Ben woke up and found himself alone at home, he quickly ran to the party hall to check if his family was in danger. At the same time, Yates had arranged to meet Morgan and the other mutants at the school. Before he could steal Carter's powers, Ben appeared and attacked him. Realizing he wasn't strong enough to defeat him, he transformed into Carter to try to distract his enemy. At that moment, investigator Darren appeared, and when he saw his daughter in danger, he attacked Yates, but his knee injury prevented him from standing. Afraid, Ben ran out of the school and was thrown out of the window. At that moment, he met Maxie and asked for her help to capture the enemy. After borrowing her brother's jacket, Maxie ran to the playground and distracted Yates to give Ben and Carter a chance to trap him. Finally, Carter, who was fighting him, used the powers she inherited from her mother to return the stolen powers to her friends. After the battle, Ben and Maxie ran to reunite with the rest of the family, and Carter felt relieved that she could finally be close to her father without fearing Yates chasing her. Now that Yates has been captured, he will be brought to trial. Morgan thanked Ben for his great help. That night, while Ben was resting after everything that happened, he began to feel an electric current running through his body. He started noticing that something was wrong with his powers, and here our story stops, to be continued later. What do you think of this series? Write your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to see summaries of other series. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.